Bring $200,000 when you come to dinner? My son said. Over the phone, his first words to me in 5 years. I stood in my kitchen hand, still holding the receiver, though the call had already ended. No greeting, no apology, no hesitation. Just a number dropped like a stone into the silence between us. It wasn't the amount that stunned me. It was the ease with which he said it, as if asking for a side dish to bring to dinner. As if 5 years of absence hadn't passed since the last time I heard his voice. I'd posted the photo the night before. A silver Mercedes S-Class sitting in my driveway. My first indulgence since selling the business and retiring. I hadn't captioned it with anything other than treating myself. Time. It wasn't a message, at least not intentionally, but now it felt like bait. Jamie had ignored every message I ever sent on holidays, birthdays, the day I was admitted to the hospital for shortness of breath. Nothing. Not even a thumbs up. 5 years of silence until the glint of polished chrome sparked a memory that his mother might still be useful. I placed the phone down and walked to the living room, past the same bookshelf that held the albums of his childhood. His kindergarten drawings still lived in a folder I couldn't quite throw out. For years, I'd kept the door open in my heart, thinking maybe time would do what words couldn't. But apparently money could. I didn't cry. I didn't even finish my coffee. I just stared out at the car he'd seen and calculated from. The car he thought would mean cash. I wouldn't show up empty-handed. But I wouldn't bring a check. I'd bring something better. Something signed. Something that couldn't be returned. Something that would settle more than just a dinner. And he would learn that some things, once given, don't come back. Tomorrow at 6, I'd see my son again. I wasn't planning to buy the car. Not really. I had gone in for an oil change on the old Camry, and there it was, polished, still absurdly elegant. A silver Mercedes S-Class that looked like it belonged to someone whose life hadn't been reduced to silence and waiting. The salesman made polite conversation, but I wasn't listening to his pitch. I was staring at the car like it had something to tell me, and maybe it did. Maybe it said, "You're not invisible." I signed the paperwork before I could second-guess myself. I drove it off the lot feeling something unfamiliar pride without apology. The leather smelled like decision, and for once the decision had been mine alone. That night, I parked it in my driveway and took a photo. Not of me, not of the keys in my hand, just the car, still and unapologetic beneath the porch light. I posted it with a caption that took me 20 minutes to write. Treated myself. Finally. I almost didn't hit post. Then I saw the view count climb. Among the names, Jamie Fields. 3 times. Once at 7:04 p.m., again at 9:12, and then again just before midnight. And the next morning, he called. Not to say the car looked beautiful. Not to say he was happy for me. Just dinner. Tomorrow. Bring $200,000. He didn't ask why I'd bought it, how I was doing, or if I still lived in the same house. He didn't ask because he didn't care. He thought the car meant I had money to spare. More importantly, he thought I was still the woman who would say yes, the woman who paid off his grad school loans without asking, the one who co-signed his second mortgage, the one who once drained her own retirement to cover his emergency. But she was gone now. And what he was about to receive wasn't money. It was clarity. And clarity has a price. 5 years ago, I sat across from Jamie and his wife in my living room with a check folded neatly inside an envelope. I had practiced what I'd say rehearsed the tone, tried to get it just right, generous, but firm. It was a gift, not an obligation, not a buyout. Just something I could do because I'd finally sold the company I'd built from the ground up. I slid the envelope across the table. $250, I said softly. No strings. Use it for the house. Or your future. Jamie didn't even touch it at first. He looked at me like I'd just offered him leftovers. "This is it?" he asked, his voice flat. "After everything you made?" His wife stared at the envelope like it insulted her. I tried to explain. The company sale had debts folded into the final number. Employee pensions, legal fees. I wasn't walking away with millions in liquid cash. But Jamie didn't want the details. He didn't want clarity. He wanted a number with more zeros. "You gave your secretary a retirement bonus," he snapped. "You gave your foreman a truck, and we get a slice." He stood red-faced, pacing like a stranger in the house he grew up in. "You always gave everything to work. To other people, never to your own family. Jamie," I said, barely getting the word out. "You are my family." He pointed at the envelope. "Then show it." I didn't cry when they left. Not when he slammed the door. Not when his wife didn't say goodbye. Not even when the check was still sitting there, 3 days later, unclaimed. But I stopped sending holiday invites after that. Stopped calling on his birthday. And now, after 5 years of silence, he was calling again. Not because of a change of heart, but because he saw something expensive in my driveway and assumed I still owed him. The morning after the call, I couldn't bring myself to make breakfast. The phone sat on the counter like it might ring again, though I knew it wouldn't. Jamie never called twice unless he wanted something. The silence that followed his demand was just as deliberate as the words themselves. I walked into my office and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Inside were years of order. Documents, tax forms, property deeds, and tucked between 2 folders was a card I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Felicity Crane, estate attorney. She'd handled my father's estate years ago, back when my biggest worry was probate paperwork and not protecting myself from my own child. I stared at her name for a long moment before dialing. Felicity Crane came her clipped voice. "It's Lenora Maddox," I said. "You helped me with my father's estate." There was a pause, followed by recognition. "Of course, Mrs. Maddox. How have you been?" "My son has reappeared," I said. "He wants money. I want to protect what's mine." "Come in tomorrow morning," she replied without hesitation. "We'll talk strategy." Her tone carried no surprise, only understanding. It was almost comforting, that steadiness. After hanging up, I moved to the bookshelf and began gathering what she'd need: the deed to my house statements from the sale of the company, proof of the $250,000 gift emails I had sent over the years unanswered and unread. Each paper felt heavier than it should have. Each line of text another record of effort ignored. I stacked them neatly, not for nostalgia, but for clarity. If my son wanted to treat me like a transaction, I would show him I knew how to manage one. By evening, the folder sat ready on my desk, 5 years of silence bound and labeled. I locked the drawer and sat in the quiet of my house, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound left. Tomorrow, I'd go see Felicity, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading a conversation. Felicity's office smelled like old paper and new ink. Her desk was neat as ever, organized, calm, deliberate. I placed the leather folder in front of her and took a seat without needing to be asked. She opened the documents in silence, her eyes skimming over dates, numbers, printed screenshots. Her pen tapped the corner of one of Jamie's text messages. The one with the $200,000 request. "No, how are you? No, I miss you." When she finally looked up, her voice was even. "You want to disinherit him? I want to protect what I built," I said. "From someone who only sees it as a vault to raid." Felicity didn't flinch. She simply turned to her computer, began typing, and pulled up the most recent Pennsylvania estate law references. We reviewed every angle, every possible challenge. She asked for clarity. I gave her 5 years' worth. By noon, we had rewritten my will. By 2, we'd created an irrevocable trust effective immediately. I redirected $400,000 into a scholarship fund for trade workers, plumbers, welders, masons, people who built with their hands and didn't treat love like a bargaining chip. The rest remained in my estate, now sealed with a no contest clause, notarized, witnessed, and stamped with Felicity's cold precision. She printed 5 official copies. I signed each one slowly, making sure I understood every word. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. Felicity slid the final signed copy across the desk. "Keep this one safe," she said. I slid it into a fresh folder, white, clean, quiet. "This one's for dinner," I told her. Felicity didn't smile. She just nodded once firmly. By the time I left her office, the sun had dropped low in the sky. I walked to my car with my hands steady and my shoulders light. There were still things to prepare: what I'd wear, how I'd sit, what I'd say. But the most important part was already done. I had the document. Now all I needed was a table. Jamie opened the door like nothing had happened, like 5 years hadn't passed in silence, like the words he left me with hadn't left a bruise that never fully healed. "Mom," he beamed, stepping aside. "Come in. You look, well." His wife Lila followed from the kitchen, acting surprised to see me, though the table was already set for 3. Cloth napkins matching silverware and a bottle of red breathing in a decanter. Jamie poured me a glass without asking if I still drank. I didn't. But I held the glass anyway. He talked about my car, asked how big the engine was, if I'd added any features. He mentioned the neighborhood said he heard I'd made renovations. He even complimented the new siding on the house, something I hadn't told anyone. I nodded through it all. Not once did he ask how I'd been, if I was healthy, if I was lonely. Then the shift came. So he said, clearing his throat, "We've got something we're really excited about. It's a development opportunity. Lila's brother knows a guy in zoning, and there's this lot near the river, undeveloped land, real potential." Lila chimed in, "We just need to secure the initial capital to get the permits moving." Jamie leaned forward. "It would only take $200,000 to get us started. We'd make it back in the first year easily. And of course, we'd pay you back. With interest." I let the silence stretch between us for a moment. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the white folder. "This is for you," I said, sliding it across the table. Jamie opened it with the anticipation of someone expecting a check. Instead, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the first page. "What is this?" "My will," I said simply. "Updated, notarized, effective immediately." His face shifted confusion first, then tension. I took a sip of the wine I didn't want. It tasted bitter, but not unfamiliar. Jamie shot to his feet so suddenly that the chair screeched against the tile. The sound cut through the air, sharp and final. His face went red, the vein at his temple twitching. "What is this?" he shouted, shaking the folder as if the words on the page could change under his grip. "A reality check," I said, keeping my tone even. "Something you've been avoiding for years." Lila pressed a napkin to her mouth. The tears came fast, but they weren't the kind born of sorrow. They were anger disguised as hurt, the kind that comes when the plan starts to unravel. Jamie's voice rose again, louder this time. "You think you can just erase me. You can't do this. I'm your son." "You were," I said quietly. "Then you stopped acting like one." He paced, muttering threats, lawsuits, court challenges, some imagined right he believed he still had. Lila tried to calm him, but her words tangled with his fury. The air smelled like wine and panic. I didn't move. I'd lived through louder storms. I'd heard worse words from better men. What hurt wasn't the shouting, it was knowing how easily it came to him, how quickly love could turn into calculation when numbers were involved. "You think this makes you powerful?" he said, slamming his hand on the table. "You'll regret this." I stood. My chair didn't make a sound. "You stopped calling. You stopped visiting. You stopped being part of my life until you saw a car you wanted to climb into." I looked at him not with anger, but with something colder. That's not love. That's strategy. He started to speak, but I was already walking toward the door. The folder lay open on the table, the signature at the bottom still drying. Lila's sobs followed me into the hallway. Jamie's voice broke into shouts again, words that didn't reach me. I stepped outside into the night air. It was still cool and clean. The shouting muffled behind the door. I didn't flinch. The messages began before I even got home. Missed calls stacked on my screen like dominoes. 16 in total before midnight. I didn't answer any of them. I sat in the quiet of my car, hands steady on the wheel, listening to the soft buzz of the phone, lighting up again and again. By morning, the voicemails came. Apologies that weren't apologies. Accusations buried in regret. You misunderstood. We can fix this. You've embarrassed us. Then Lila's emails followed long, twisting paragraphs about family love and how I'd forced their hand. 2 days later, a letter arrived by courier. A formal challenge to the will. Jamie had found a lawyer. The document claimed I had been under emotional distress, mentally compromised, and subject to manipulation. I took it straight to Felicity. She read it with the detachment of someone reading the weather report. I expected this, she said. They'll try to paint you as unstable. We'll make that impossible. We scheduled everything medical, psychological, cognitive, every evaluation done by certified professionals. I passed them all easily. Years of running a company had kept my mind sharper than either of them ever knew. Felicity compiled the reports into a single file, notarized, stamped airtight. If they want to fight, we'll make them regret the paperwork, she said. That night, I went through my phone and saved everything. Voicemails, texts, emails. I began recording any new calls automatically. Every word was evidence, every insult, another brick in the wall I was building. I wasn't angry anymore, not even hurt. What I felt was focus the kind I used to have when I ran board meetings and construction schedules. They thought I was an old woman clutching her pride. But this was logistics. A project. By the end of the week, my house was quiet again. The phone had stopped ringing, but I knew silence didn't mean surrender. They were regrouping, and soon they'd make their next move. We met in Felicity's office on a gray Wednesday morning. Jamie arrived in a tailored suit that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. His lawyer was younger than I expected, overconfident in that way. New attorneys sometimes are too green to know how deep some roots go. Jamie didn't look at me when he sat down. I didn't offer a greeting. We were past that. His lawyer opened with practiced politeness. We're here to resolve what we believe was an emotionally impulsive change to your estate plan. Mr. Fields and his wife are prepared to accept a reinstated position in the will. Nothing aggressive. A minimum inheritance of $1 million. I waited. So did Felicity. Then without a word, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a flash drive. She slid it into her laptop and clicked play. My voice filled the room calm and steady from that night at dinner. Jamie's voice followed, laughing, pitching the investment, referencing my car, calling it her golden goose. Lila's voice chimed in, clear and unmistakable. No one spoke until the audio stopped. Felicity didn't glance up. She just set the next folder on the table, an official copy of the irrevocable trust. Dated. Funded. Executed. She turned the folder toward them. This money is already gone, she said evenly. It now supports a statewide program for vocational training, scholarships for young builders, electricians, and welders. I looked at Jamie then. People who know what it means to work for something. People who still remember how to say, thank you. His lawyer cleared his throat, his eyes no longer so sure. We'll need a moment. They stepped into the hallway. 10 minutes passed. When they returned, the lawyer's tone had shifted. We're withdrawing the challenge. Jamie didn't speak. He didn't look at me. He only nodded once stiffly before walking out. Felicity gathered the files like it was any other case. I thanked her, quietly. As I stepped into the elevator, I felt no triumph. Just relief. The fight was over. But I still had something left to do. I drove home through quiet streets past the bakery that still opened before sunrise, the same corner store where I used to buy Jamie his favorite gum when he was little. Nothing outside had changed, but I had. The documents were tucked away in my bag. The will final. The trust untouchable. Every part of the life I'd built shielded now from those who had mistaken proximity for entitlement. I stepped inside my house, turned on a single lamp, and exhaled. No more legal letters. No more phone calls. No more waiting for someone to remember I existed beyond my bank account. I hadn't just secured my estate. I'd preserved the truth, not just about my money, but about who I was and how I got here. I'd spent a lifetime building first a company, then a home, and always quietly trying to hold together the parts of a family that kept pulling away. And in the end, I had given generously, just not to the ones who demanded it with clenched fists and tight smiles. Tomorrow, I would visit the trade school. I'd already received the first letter handwritten by a young woman named Bria, who'd used the grant to enroll in electrical training. She wrote about wanting to work with her hands like her grandfather did. She wrote thank you, like it meant something. I placed the letter on the kitchen table. Next to it, I set down the single copy of my will I kept for myself. Then I poured a cup of tea, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and sat by the window listening to nothing in particular. It was quiet, but not empty. No shouting, no demands. Just the soft creak of a house that had stood through decades now, finally still. And in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't dared believe in. A long time I didn't need to be remembered to be at peace. I just needed to choose who would carry my story forward.